both of our country and the respected Iraq as well. First of all, I would like to welcome all the dear ones, especially the students of University of Basrah. And I hope that the electricity in our region will not be cut off during this speech. Although I think the power outage is probably one of the consequences of our neglect of the environmental issues. The subject of my talk is the environmental impact of synthetic or chemical pesticides, which are considered a major group of environmental pollutants. Especially if we look at the statistic, we will see that despite the fact that 70% of the pesticide trade in the world belong to the interests of 10 large companies located in the developed countries. But only 50% of the problem and adverse health effect of pesticides have been reported from developing countries. It means that most the problem is for developing country, but the benefits is from developed country. So is the problem the pesticide not for Iraq or for Iran? Are the main problem for all of the world, and contamination, the air, contamination of the soil, contamination of the plant, contamination of our foods, resulted in many problems in our country and perhaps in Iraq as well. So I'm very happy to start this lecture. Maybe in the future, some of our problems can be solved. If I have a look at the definition of pesticide to see what is the pesticide. Pesticide is a substance or mixture of substance intended for preventing, destroying, repelling, or lessening the damage used by the pest. A pesticide can be a chemical, biological agent, antimicrobial, disinfectant, etc. Even bleach can be considered a pesticide that all of the day we are using in our home. Many chemical pesticides are poisonous to human and animals. A pest can be an insect, plant pathogen, weed, bacteria, bird, and that they're competing with the human for food, destroying our property, spreading diseases, especially in a health problem. Approximately 5.6 billion pounds, about 2 or 3 million tons of active ingredient are used worldwide. In many developing countries, programs to control exposures are limited or non-existent. Throughout this entire period, herbicides were the most commonly used pesticide. More than 17,000 kinds of pesticide products are currently on the market. That is, formulation, with many of them approved through conditional registration. regularly loophole that allows products on the market quickly without thorough review is the main problem also in my country. If look at the pesticide use differentiated by type in Iraq and in Iran, you can see from the graph that in Iran, for example, in 1992, we have got the statistic to 2016. Also, what I get from Iraq is from 1997 to 2007. In Iran, it started from about maximum in about 9,000 pounds, that it was in 1995. And from that time, it decreased. And in 2016, we have reached to about 4,000 ton. That you can see that herbicide in and insecticide were the most used in our country. In Iraq also, much less than in Iran. It started from about in 1997, 800 ton, and unfortunately it rise to more than 1,000 ton in 2007. And now I haven't the data about that. But still insecticide and herbicide are the most used pesticide in Iraq as well. And several ways, there are several ways to classify pesticide. Sometimes it divided according to the target pest, for example, fungicide, insecticide, herbicide, nematicide, acaricide, rodenticide. Sometimes it divided according to formulation, for example, dust, fumigant, granulal. Origin, for example, divided about based on origin, natural versus about synthetic product. Route of exposure, contact for the gastrointestinal tract, inhalation. Also, the most recently, they have divided according to chemical composition, for example, organic, synthetic, inorganic, or miscellaneous compound. And much more modern classification is about the mode of action, neurotoxicant, growth regulator, antifuran, and so on. So I will have a look at some classification of pesticide according to target organisms. We can divide it different types of herbicide, herbicide, algicide, bactericide, molluscicide, acaricide or miticide, rodenticide, nematicide, fungicide, that all of them killing the pest target. And there are some examples of these pesticides that you can see in the table on the left of the screen that you can see some of the example of these pesticides according to target. Although based on name of the pesticide that is mean killing the pest, some chemicals are legally classed as insecticide, but not ending in side and not necessarily killing the pest. For example, attractants mean they are attract insect, or chemosterilant, they sterilize insects, birds or rodents, prevent reproduction. some insect growth regulator, they stimulate or retard growth of insects, interrupt normal development. Pheromone also can be regarded as a pesticide. They release from individual and affect the physiology or behavior of another individual of the same species. Female, for example, emitted to call males for copulation or mating. We have got repellents that repel insects, mites, or ticks, or pest vertebrate, such as dogs, rabbit, birds, deer. And by this means prevent damage by rendering the commodity unattractive or unpalatable or offensive. So they are not necessarily kill the pest, but they remove or they interfere the metabolism of the pest. And also, as formulation is related to our environment, so I will a little bit talk about the formulation. Why to formulate pesticide? Pesticides are rarely applied in their technical form. They are usually formulated to improve handling, storage, application, or effectiveness or safety for improving these factors. So a pesticide formulation is a mixture of chemicals which effectively control the pest. Formulating the pesticide helps to improve the storage, handling, safety, application, or effectiveness. Pesticide products sold as concentrate must be mixed with water or some other carrier before being applied. So on the left-hand side, you can see that how formulation is developed. So in the formulator plants or factory, active ingredient, perhaps it's a solid or liquid, mixed with some inert ingredient that most of them, they are surfactant or active, surface active agent. And then it's sold in the market. Active ingredient is a part of pesticide that has pesticidal properties or insecticidal properties, kill, impair, or affect the pest. Inert ingredient, part of the pesticide that formulation that acts as, for example, emulsifier or solvent or carriers or surfactant, and supposedly would not affect the pest if used by itself. But some inert ingredient may be more toxic to human than the active ingredient. Here I put down some feature that what inert ingredient or emulsifier do the formulation. And all of them, they can be regarded as adjuvant that added to a spray solution in order to enhance or modify the performance of the spray mixture. And most adjuvants or inert ingredient related to surfactant or active surface active agent that there is a problem in our environment about this inert ingredient. They may be acidifier or buffering agent or anti-foaming agent or drip control agent or emulsifier, for example. In the right-hand side, you can see the what emulsifier affect or how they affect the technical material and improve the formulation. For instance, droplet of the water can be spread on the surface of the leaf or contaminate it completely or cover the surface of the leaf. Similar facility and similar improvement in the application of technical material is provided by formulation. So, as I said, for ease of pesticide product handling, for suitable measuring and mixing pesticide, and also for safety, more safety, the formulation, also for better penetration, for more selectivity, and for increased effectiveness, the formulation come to the market. Here, I divided the pesticide according to the exposure. For example, from the stomach, or from inhalation, or from contact, or fumigate. They can enter the insect either by oral or antennae or cuticle or legs or wings or the surface of the body, also a spiracle, that is the stomata. And finally, inside the components of the insect, they produce poisoning. Perhaps the most pesticide affect our nervous system, but all of the tissue, for example, blood tissue, trachea, alimentary canal, or integument may be affected, and the insect finally died because of severe poisoning. And related to the human being, we also got dermal, oral, and respiratory system that from the entering pesticide from these three entities depends of the type and the use of pesticide. And the other, they may be put a residue on the food or drinking in the water, and then orally consumed by the people. The most entering way is the dermal exposure that you can see on the figure. They differentiated based on different parts of the body. You can see that the genital area compared to the other parts mostly observe the pesticide. After genital area, we've got the ear canal and forehead that the mostly affected by the pesticide. And based on origin, we have got synthetic pesticide that they are chemically synthesized. For example, organochlorine, organophosphate, carbamide, pyrethroid, that they are most abundant pesticide that and insecticide that we are using now. And we have got natural pesticide, our biopesticide that derive from natural materials such as plants, animal, bacteria, and a mineral. And they can be divided for 4 categories: microbial pesticide, derived from bacteria, fungi, viruses, protozoa; biochemical pesticide, naturally occurring substances that mimics, for example, the insect sex hormone, or some other similar material. But botanical, they are natural extract obtained from plants, for example, as a attractant from neem seed or nicotine from tobacco. Also, we've got recently plant incorporated insecticide that, for example, GMO, genetically modified plants, or they are originally produced by plants after adding genetic material, for example, Bacillus thuringiensis, BT crops. They are about the natural pesticide or biopesticide. It is said that they are friendly environmental pesticide. There is some doubt about GMO or the last item, plant incorporated pesticide, between naturalists and between some other against people that there is some, but generally natural pesticide or biopesticide are considered as environmental friendly pesticide. Focusing on insecticide, I put down here some example are most organic, synthetic organic pesticide, that organochlorine, organophosphate, carbamate, and pyrethroid. I put some examples that mostly used or maybe historical is valuable for our environmental, for example, DDT or BHC. Some of them, they are banned. I put down here to remind you some historical of the problem. Let's have a look at the mode of action of major insecticide. Some physical method, for example, desiccant, diatoms, asphyxiant, that they physically block the entering of the respiratory or muscle toxin, for example, some ryanodine or sabadilla, that they are biorational or biopesticide. Some fumigant, they are necrotics, and some biological pesticides such as BT endotoxin, they are cystolytic, and we have got also some pesticide that they are affect on nervous central nervous system, or generally they are nervous poison. They may interfere with sodium channel or chloride channel, or they are maybe some of them, they are alkylated agent, or interfere with metabolism, as for example inhibit the glycolysis, and so interfere with the producing ATP, and some of them such as rotenone and cyanide hydrogen, they are mitochondrial poison, that they are interfere with the electron transport and chain in the respiratory system. I put here's mode of action of rotenone, that they interfere with the electron transport chain in the mitochondrial, that they have shown that rotenone in the first step block the transferring of the electron, and so they interfere with the ATP synthesis. Also, I represent the effects of nicotine on the synaptic transmission of the pulses in the nervous system, that nicotine mimic the acetylcholine that is considered a neurotransmitter in the synapse, so prevent the transferring of normal normal messages in the nervous system. So you can be that act as a synaptic poison that mimic the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Here is complete mode of action of classification that recently is accepted and scientifically is more appropriate for discussion about some environmental effect that they may have in our wildlife and other animals as well. And it has got many groups according to the specific mode of action. For example, some of them, they interfere with molting and metamorphosis. For example, they are ecdysone agonist or disruptor, or they mimic juvenile hormone in insect, or some of them, they produce some difficulty in cuticle synthesis, or some of them, they interfere with the metabolic processes, for example, inhibitors of oxidative phosphorylation, or some of them uncoupler of oxidative phosphorylation via disruption of H protein gradient, especially chlorophenol, and some of them with the digestive system, mid-gut, especially microbial disruptor in that in the insect, the mid-gut membrane, they produce, they affect the digestive system, or most important are those that they affect nervous system, that they are divided to several groups. For example, some of them, they acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. Some of them, they are GABA-gated chloride channel antagonists. Some of them sodium channel modulator, or acetylcholine receptor agonist. Some of them are acetylcholine receptor modulators, and some is considered as chloride channel activators. Also, we have got the pesticide that interfere with the metabolic processes. For example, electron transport inhibitor, or electron transport inhibitor site 1 and site 2. Some non-specific mode of action, they have non-specific mode of action. They are compounds with the non-specific mode of action. Perhaps they are feeding blockers. Until now, we don't know exactly how they act on the insect. So this poster is available in the internet, and you can have a look at the details of all of the mode of action of recently produce insecticide. But why do we apply pesticide? You know that without the use of pesticide, more than half of our crops would be lost to pests and diseases. Between 26 to 40% of the world's potential crop production is lost annually because of weeds, pests, and diseases. Without crop protection, these losses could easily double. It means about 50% or 80% of our products and our belongings will be lost. So pesticide, in terms of control pests, they are cost effective. If you exactly know where on how to spray, so is completely protect your plants and your belongings. If you know how to protect exactly, so pesticide protect stored food products, stored food grains or some other products. It protecting the crop from pests, crop plants especially, and it control household pests. It protection our pet and human, especially in health problem. And sometimes it is said that even it protects our environment because using, for example, herbicide to control weeds, so reduce the need for tillage, and in this manner reducing land degradation. So it depends of how to look at the pesticide. If we look at the pros and cons of pesticide, I will look at the left-hand side of the table that is about the hazard. So the direct impact of humans, possible carcinogenicity, neurotoxicity, reproductive and metabolic toxicity of pesticide accumulated in the body, or impact of our environment, surface water contamination, groundwater contamination, soil contamination, and effect on soil fertility, air contamination, even non-target vegetation contamination, and destruction of useful organisms and beneficial, for example, predator or parasite. They are hazards that if we don't look at our environment, all of these hazards and compensate all of the benefit that we have got. Okay. Perhaps the first document on ecological effects of pesticides is related to the book of Rachel Carson, who was a biologist or ecologist writer, very influential writer. She protested the use of chemicals, pesticide in the environment for farming, etc., and resulted in the Water Quality Act in most developed countries, America and Europe as well. And it triggered the modern environmental movement. So Silent Sprint published in 1962 by Rachel Carson was most influential book on environmental movement. and the chemical and pesticide industry alarmed by book success. So this book explained the environmental problems associated with the indiscriminate use of pesticide. Look at where come from our pollutant, source of environmental pollutant. We have got non-point source pollution, that it contamination that comes from a wide area. For example, here on the left hand side of the figure, we have got drainage or preferential fellow surfaces runoff and erosion, or spray drift and atmospheric deposition. That is a wide area that we don't know where it comes from. They are called a non-point source solution. So drift of pesticide through the air, atmospheric deposition, drainage, and pesticide runoff into waterway, soil erosion, particularly through after runoff, we have got soil erosion, and pesticide movement into groundwater. They are considered a non-point source pollution. And on the left-hand side, at the bottom of the figure, you can see point source pollution, contamination that comes from a specific identifiable place for a specific point. For example, pesticide spills and wash water from cleanup site, for example, car wash, okay? Or leaks from a storage site where we have stored your pesticide, or improper disposal of pesticide and their containers. They can be considered as point source pollution. Look at the two examples of point source pollution. That is, as I said, is a identifiable place. For example, this man is washing the sprayer or the washing machine by itself, okay? The contamination from the for example, washing and spraying equipment comes from to the surface and or penetrate on the soil. On the right-hand side, you can see a non-point source pollution that when you travel from somewhere, all of the side of the road, you have got running of the water that contained various contaminants, and you don't know where they come from. Okay, and so they are considered a non-point source solution. Have a look at where is our environment. And the environment is considered everything around us, natural and man-made. So most of people say that the environment is natural. No, the environment in both natural and man-made, not limited to outdoors, even including indoor area in which we live and work. So in ecological point of view, at community level, ecology, that is a complex interaction that exists among interdependent organisms that cohabitate the same geographical area and with the environment. Or even at individual level, ecology entails the relationship that exists between particular individuals with numerous physical and biological factors. Okay? It is the environment, where we are living, where we are going, where we are happy, where we are sad, all of this. And also it's about the other animal in conjunction with the other animal. It is the environment. So environment is very important. So we should congratulate the day of environment, World Day Environment, that is the 4th of June. And where we are living now, we are living in Farusat Mashhad, and we are living or working at the University of Basrah. So the environment is everything around us, natural and man-made, not limited to outdoors, but including indoor area where we are live or work. So I put some picture from both university in this lecture. If you look at scientifically level of biological organization and their interaction with the environmental chemicals, particularly the pesticide, so they are a subject of ecotoxicology that gathered the toxicology science and ecology science and environment, okay, all gathered to one package. That you can see that the environmental chemicals and pesticide in the level of molecule, that is the lowest level of biological organization, to above to ecosystem and biosphere. Biosphere affects all of these levels, and as well as direct effects of each specific level. For example, on population, pesticide affect the population directly. On the other hand, it is populations is influenced or are influenced indirectly by the previous levels of biological organization, which has been affected by the pesticide. It is important that especially in an ecological point of view, when we look at the population or communities or ecosystem or even in the biosphere, on one hand, chemicals and pesticides affect directly on biosphere. On the other hand, biosphere is influenced by the previous level ecosystem and community that which has been influenced or affected by environmental chemicals as well. So it means that all the members or compartment or ingredients of our environment and different levels of biological organization have relationship with each other and incorporated in spreading of the contamination. It's very important and very nice graph that integrated all of the various biological organization, even from cells or molecules to the biosphere. But the problem is that in the low level of biological organization, for example, in molecular level or in the cell, or when we talk about tissues or organs or individual, studying this level is very simple. You can do, you can study this level in the lab or in a tube. You can, and also getting data from these levels of biological organization is very simple and take a short time. But when talking about population, community, and ecosystem or biosphere, it's time consuming, is very costly, and the study of these levels and higher levels is boring. Okay? So that is why most of the environmental result about the chemical effects of on the environment take time to appear practically in our society. Look at a very boring and a very annoying history that is not history but is repeated every day in our environment. The Bhopal gas tragedy, that it means pesticides in our midst. The worst industrial disaster in the history of the world is related to pesticide production. It occurred at Union Carbide Factory in Bhopal, India in methyl isocyanate, that is the active ingredient in the production of carbaryl or sevin, escaped into the atmosphere, killing more than 3,000 people within a few hours. After that, there are several reports that the mortality reached on the several generations now, maybe 20 or 30 million people. The insecticide carbaryl, at the name of trade name is sevin, itself is a highly toxic chemical and carcinogen to humans. The tragedy occurred due to the lack of adequate safeguards in chemical storage and lack of adequate warning to the public. You can see the factory on the right-hand side, and the people is waiting for treatment on the right-hand side, on the bottom of the right-hand side, and some other disaster. So we have got fate of pesticide in environment. Fate, it means developments of events outside a person control. So we cannot control the fate of pesticide, how pesticide move or where it moves. So life cycle of chemical or pesticide or biological pollutant after it released in the environment, we cannot control it because we cannot control the condition of our environment, the weather or the temperature or something else. So have a review of these processes. In this regard, we have got the two processes. One is a transfer process, and the other is breakdown or degradation process. Transfer processes is including adsorption, volatilization, spray drift, leaching, and absorption. You know, absorption is different from adsorption. Adsorption is means attach the pesticide on the surface of something, and absorption is mean entering to the inside of a material. And it can be happen in after releasing a pesticide in different components of our environment. Also breakdown processes, we have got the microbial breakdown or degradation, especially in the soil or in the plants as well. And chemical breakdown also happens in the air and inside the soil, and photo degradation. So what it means? It means that after spraying, you lost most of the chemical in the environment, and a minor part of the pesticide reached to the target pests. I will point it out in a few slide later on. And all of these transferring process and degradation process depend on the environmental factor, weather, temperature, wind, the texture of the soil, the kind of or type of plants and canopy, and especially all these related, they are related to groundwater. So this diagram that I show you here, now that I'm talking to you, more than 1,000 scientists in the world now doing some research on a specific each item that I put down here. For example, my colleagues in the previous session, Dr. Fotovat, specifically work on some metals on the soil, okay, and how they transfer, for example, in the soil. So it's very complex, and it needs a multidisciplinary, it is a field of multidisciplinary, so ecotoxicology is a multidisciplinary field of study, and solving the problem of environmental issue, especially environmental pollutants, is a complicated and needs hard work on this issue. Very fast, I have a look at some transfer processes. As I said, adsorption is the binding of pesticide to soil particle. The amount pesticide is absorbed to the soil varies with the type of pesticide, soil moisture, soil pH, and soil texture. Pesticides are strongly absorbed to the soil that are high in clay or organic matter. They are not strongly absorbed to sandy soil. Most soil-borne bound pesticides are less likely to give off vapors or leach through the soil. Also, volatilization is the process of solid or liquid converting into gas, which can move away from initial application site. Pesticides volatilize most readily from sandy and wet soil, hot, dry, and windy weather, and small spray drops increase volatilization. Also, incorporation of pesticide into the soil can help reduce volatilization. Also, we've got the spray drift, that is the airborne movement of spray droplets away from a treatment site during application. A spray drift is affected by droplet size. The smaller size, the more likely they will drift. It depends of wind speed. The stronger wind, the more pesticide spray will drift. Drift may also hazard to people, domestic animals, pollinator, insects. Drift can contaminate water bodies like ponds, streams, ditches, harm to fish or other aquatic plants and animals. Also, I will have a look at the runoff. Is the movement of pesticide in water over a sloping surface. Through runoff, the pesticide can either mix in the water or bound to erosion soil. Runoff can also occur when water is added to the field faster than it can be absorbed into the soil, especially when you irrigated the field, and then at the same time irrigation is started. Runoff from area where treated with pesticide can pollute streams, ponds, lakes, wells, and lowland area. And the other item is leaching, is the movement of pesticide in water through the soil filtration. Leaching occurs downward or sideways. Groundwater may be contaminated if pesticide leach from treated field or mixing site, or where you are washing site or waste disposed area. So groundwater contamination is the main point in the world now after, in my point of view, after global warming. Apparently, it's very nice water, but it's contaminated with a lot of pollutant that in the previous century, the people have used those pesticides, unfortunately. And degradation or breakdown processes, as I said, the microbial breakdown is the breakdown of chemicals by microorganisms such as fungi and bacteria. Chemical breakdown is the breakdown of pesticide by chemical reaction in the soil. Photodegradation or photolysis is the breakdown of pesticide by sunlight. All pesticides are susceptible to photodegradation to some extent. but what they have affect and how they affect the living organisms in the world and in our environment. So once again, you have you can see all of the processes and transfer processes and microbial processes in our after spraying. After spraying, many beneficial organisms maybe died or killed because of transferring to beneficial. So, and repeated measure of the spraying maybe select, produce some resistance, pesticidal resistance variant or insect. Also, we have got residue on crops and soil. Even after breakdown, some of the metabolites are more toxic than the initial product. Movement beyond the agro-ecosystem, the initial place that you have put down or sprayed your field. You can see that many beneficial organisms, honeybee and all of the parasite predators can be affected by residual of the pesticide that you have put on your field. I will have a look at some recent study on wildlife exposure to pesticide, especially on bird, different some kind of birds. And it's about of cholinesterase inhibitors, some carbamate and organophosphate that now we are using now. And it consists of dermal exposure, contaminated prey ingestion, for example, insect or earthworm that they have been contaminated by the pesticide and then consumed by the bird, or ingestion of pesticide granule that you put on the soil, but actually as a poisonous gift to the bird. So all of them, you can see that inhibition of acetylcholinesterase enzyme is reflected in that neurotoxicity, and neurotoxicity produce a little poisoning, and if they don't die, reduce. If they don't die, reduce survival, and finally, population of the birds decline. Okay. On the other side, this cholinesterase inhibitor also through inhibition of serine hydrolyze produce some immunotoxicity that reflect in reproductive failure, and so finally the population of birds decline. On the left-hand side, also by alteration of neurotransmitter level or inhibition of steroidogenesis in the gonad, through a disruption of endocrine system, is produce failure in reproductive system, and so finally all of them lead to reducing population. So this study shows that all different effects and processes that lead to poisoning or killing the target pest affects on non-target pests, on non-target organisms, sorry. That is bear, different kind of passerine and water fowl and raptors and water bear, upland game bears and so on. One of the most important effects of environmental effects of pesticide was pesticide resistance. That means the pest is tolerant the dose that you have applied. So frequently use of toxic material can select for pests resistant to them. And resistance is the ability of pests to survive normally little doses of pesticide. More common with the insect and plant pathogen, especially herbicides and some most important insects. After spraying, after insecticide spraying, you can see that only a small deposit that you can put on the plant leaf. Some is volatilized, some is phototransport, some of them is washed off by the rain, and if some maybe penetrate to the leaf, and if it is a contact, for example, pesticide, some attach to the surface of the insect. And if you have a look at the details, only less than 0.1% of employed pesticide will effectively reach the target. It means 99.9% lost after spraying. It's very important. The remaining pesticides are found to be tenacious in the environment, having a half-life of 15 to 30 years. That means polluted environment, living in a polluted environment, okay? And we have got residue in the environment. Residue amount of a pesticide or its metabolite that remained on the soil, remained on the surface of the crop, that is not intended, for example, for when spraying with the insecticide, we are going to kill the target pest insect, not the crop. But after remaining on the surface of the crop, several, for example, endpoints will appear, or some pesticide may be integrated into tissue, especially those that they are systemic pesticide and consumed, for example, by herbivore. Okay. And beyond agro-ecosystem in the air, after volatilization, that the pest or the gas of the gaseous pesticide you can find in the air, depending on the vapor pressure. When the vapor pressure is high, the volatilization will be high. Okay? So a drift, that is unintentional movement of pesticide. We cannot say anything to drift where you should go. Okay, so a spray, dust, etc. through the air away from intended target. So not always during the application, sometimes in terms of application of some fumigants such as methyl bromide, you can affect it by drift, not by drift, but completely by direct filling of the methyl bromide. There is a large, great danger. Also in the soil, we have got runoff or leaching, that the water is contaminated. Some organisms, microorganisms, they are able to biodegrade, and this pollutant, but some of them, they are in danger because they are affected by the pollutant. So biodegradation, rather than being broken down sometimes in the less toxic products, metabolites can be more toxic than parent compound. So can also alter the persistence or solubility. Depends of the structure, chemical structure of the pollutant. And so if I look at the pesticide dissipation in the environment, we don't know or exactly know how fast and which pathway predominant, depends on the chemical properties and environmental condition. Volatile loss, photodegradation, plant uptake, chemical degradation, microbial degradation, leaching or runoff. How fast they are predominant and which pathway, it depends on the chemical properties and the weather condition or other environmental condition. So one of the most important in this issue is groundwater quality. As I said, both in the urban area and in the agricultural area and in the industrial area, water quality, groundwater quality is danger, because especially when the water table is high. So both river and upper water and runoff, and so water waste, groundwater also contaminated by the most pollutants, especially with the pesticide. So I will have a look at the here I should mention about the precipitation. After the evaporation of pesticide, some of pesticide may be dissolved in the rain droplets or water droplets in the air, and then again back to the surface of the soil or surface of the plants and crops, and they may again, as if you spray all of the world again with the pesticide that we have previously before, okay? So it's very important. Some of the pesticide in the air may, mostly those that they are as a dust or granule, they are scattered in the air and then settle down on the water or on the surface of the soil, they are considered as dry deposition. So wet deposition is caused by precipitation, and dry deposition is caused by settling down of the granules or particle of pesticide underground or on the surface of the plants, and all of the properties that we have got. So it means that several years, for example, after spraying, you may be encountered with the spraying again by the pollution that you have been responsible for it several years ago. Okay. Also, the most important issue is the persistent organic pollutant. That's the simplest view of pesticide persistence is that of no loss at all. Repeated applications simply raise the concentration in the soil in a stepwise fashion for as long as the practice continues. Some metals such as arsenic, mercury, and lead approach this extreme of persistence more closely than do any of the synthetic organic pesticide. But as we talk about the synthetic organic pesticide, I put down here a table that classified organic chemical pesticide based on persistence in the soil. So those that non-persistence, it means half-life class, half-life less than 30 years. And with the moderate persistence, their half-life is greater than 30 days, but less than 100 days. And those that have got half-life greater than 100 days is regarded as persistent contaminant. So, for example, arbicarb and aldrin and heptachlor and bromacil and so on, all of these categories I put down here. So it classified only according to persistence, but here, for example, 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T, or some of the dangerous chemicals such as aldicarb, for example, okay, here is regarded as non-persistent, but it doesn't mean that it cannot damage to the environment, but they damage on the other property that they have, okay? So, but as petroleum, for example, oil, persistence is persist the environment, and its persistence is very high. So the more the persistence in the chemical, the more danger is the chemical as well. If I have a look at the pest resistance to the chemicals or to the pesticide, so as we have seen, pest population may evolve resistant to pesticide over time. Undesirable changes in the gene pool of the pest. So when a pesticide is first used, a small proportion of the pest population may survive exposure to the material due to their distinct genetic makeup. These individuals pass along the genes for resistance to the next generation, And subsequent uses of the pesticide, as you can see in the graph, uses the pesticide increase in the population of less susceptible individual in the population. So what it means? It means that after 1 or 2 generations, the most abundant population is related to those that they are resistant to pesticide. That is, for example, in the later generation, or second or third generation, you can see that susceptible is damaged by, killed. They killed by the pesticide. But the red one, that is that they have gene resistance, is produce and they grow the population of the increased resistant gene. So it happened also both in pesticide and in about the plants and about the insect. So every time this cycle is continuous. So the cycle of pesticide, that is called a pesticide treadmill. What it means? It means that the cycle of pesticide development followed by pesticide resistance and requiring development of a new pesticide. So every year you need a new pesticide. For decades, conventional farmers have been trapped on a pesticide treadmill. When persistent organochlorine pesticide like DDT were phased out for their health and environment harms, a new fast-acting generation of organophosphate were phased in, and the pattern is continued. So, worldwide, more than 500 species of insect, mites, and spider developed some level of pesticidal resistance. Top 20 resistant arthropods you can see in the table, that in agriculture and urban ecosystem, that the most important and the most dangerous one is the two-spotted spider mite, Tetranicus orticae. That is the pest of most fruit crops and is notorious for rapidly developing resistance to miticide. So nowadays, 500 increased to I think more than 600 species in the world. So what it means? It means that treadmill, pesticide treadmill, induce the increase of pesticide usage and needs a new development of a new pesticide. So pesticide treatment, the cycle of pesticide again, I repeated it, development followed by pesticide resistance, requiring the development of a new pesticide. But what is the problem? The problem is that we cannot reach to, and we cannot reach to the pest resistance, because pest resistance or pesticide or insecticide resistance to of the pest is higher than development of a new pesticide. So pesticide treadmill, you cannot overwhelm the pesticide treatment unless you basically look at the nature of the resistance, nature of the environment, and realize the relationship that between components of the environment, especially living organisms. So one thing is about pesticide biomagnification, that is a long history about DDT or mercury, especially organic mercury that rise up on the food chain. So the accumulation of more toxin in the bodies of organisms as you move from producer to primary consumer and then secondary consumer. It occurs when a chemical becomes more and more concentrated as you move up in the food chain. So the level, the producer in the low level of food chain, they may not damage from the pesticide, but higher level, because of concentration of the pesticide in their body, they are affected by the pesticide. For example, here in the water, you can see is a 0.0003 ppm, but in the bear, that is the higher up the food chain, you can see that 25 ppm concentration of the DDTs. Also, the same is happening about the mercury that increased up the food chain. Also, I pointed out on some health effects of pollution on the human being. That is we all should. All of these activity is for our health. So, air pollution, you can see that affects our nerve, or for example, respiratory illness, respiratory system, and cardiovascular, digestive system, also produce some cancer or nausea, or some skin radiation. Also soil contamination, the same through pesticide can put some disaster or illnesses in the different of the party. Also water pollution on the mind, also on the digestive system. Okay, so you can see that air pollution, water pollution, soil contamination, all of them attack different part of the body that I put in the filter for you and or summarize for you. Okay. So what we should do, only we can do, we cannot stop the drift of the spraying, or we cannot stop movement of the water into the ground water or contamination into them. But we can only safe use pesticide. Do not use banned pesticide. Get a permitted before usage. Read the instruction label on the product before usage and for the selection. Understand this risk sign. Store the pesticide at dry place which is not accessible to children. Put warning sign application. This is very important, especially in developing country, Iran and Iraq, that they are not considered as well. Use protective equipment before the usage of pesticide. Mix the pesticide in well-ventilated areas and keep unauthorized person away. Safe transport of pesticide. First, find the targeted pest is very important. So they are precautionary measurement for the safe use of pesticide. So in conclusion, there is now a need for the agriculture sector to adopt modern methods which reduce the adverse environmental effects, ensure more productive use of the available resources, and thereby serve the nation effectively. Integrated pest management is a sustainable approach to pest management by a combination of biological, mechanical, physical, and chemical methods. It is important to educate the farmers about the appropriate kind of pesticides, its dosage and quantity and application frequency. Correct and judicious use of crop protection chemicals support sustainable farm management, delivers significant socio-economic benefits to meet the challenges of feeding an ever-growing population. And last but not least, I should point out some points from Quran. That is Islamic beliefs. There are over 600 verses in the Holy Quran, of which more than 500 deal with the natural phenomena. God, the Almighty, is repeatedly called on mankind to reflect on his sign, which include all aspects of nature, such as trees, mountains, seas, animals, birds, stars, the sun and the moon, and our own hearts. Environmental awareness and protection of natural resources is an integral part of the Islamic beliefs. A major objective of Islamic teachings and Prophet, peace upon him, traditions is to build and maintain a healthy and clean environment which is devoid of any source of pollution and misuse. Thank you very much for your patience, and I hope you realize what I have in my mind, and any question that you have got, I will be available in a few minutes that I can respond to you. If
yes,
the message is English, is no problem. I will able to answer it, and also if I can talk with the audience as much as I be able to talk.
Thank you, Dr. Moravvej, for this important information. Do you hear me, please?
Yeah, okay.
Dr. Moravvej, do you hear me?
But yes, I hear you.
Thank you so much for this lecture. Actually, it's include very important information. I have two short questions. The first, does nanotechnologies can minimize the negative effect of classic pesticide? And the second question, do you have any published data about pesticide residue in milk product and fish? Thank you so much.
Okay. I got your first question that nanotechnology is a useful method for increasing the efficacy of pesticide when we apply them, because the penetration into the target organisms and the control of release into the target is provided by the nanotechnology, And so I am our student in the Ferrusi University of Mashhad now produce some nanomaterial. They have produced some nanomaterial from essential oil and some extract of medicinal plants that they have insecticidal properties. And we believe that this method will be is as environmental friendly pesticide, and we encourage our society and the government that there is no way that they focus on biological pesticide or biological material, especially those that derive from the plants, that they are from our nature, and particularly those that they employed some modern technology such as nano that I have mentioned. But if you repeat your second question, I will be happy to understand what exactly you are saying. Thank you very much.
I mean, do you have any published data about pesticide residue in milk and fish in Iran?
Yeah. I personally, I haven't got any publication in it, but my colleague, our colleague in the Tehran University and some other groups, they have analyzed the residue of some pesticide recently, in about 2 or 3 years ago. But the problem is that they are not organized as you can see in the most developed countries such as US or in England. That I was there for 5 years there. They are very organized, and they actually analyze all of the different parts of their country because they have got financial. They haven't got financial problem in this regard, and they have analyzed all of them. Unfortunately, our studies is very scattered and is very dispersed, and we are not organized in a one. But yes, we have got some publication in this issue. But our department, we haven't got specifically on the residue of the pesticide, and we hope that if a candidate of PhD students is available, we can start it now, and we have got the facility for measuring of the residue in our faculty as well.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
You're welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor. Dr. Muhammad Amr.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Is it okay to ask a question, please?
Repeat it because
okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, Doctor. Thank you very much for your lecture today about the huge informations and their applicability to our department. Thank you indeed for your contribution.
You're welcome.
I have very general question. As you know, our environment is very harsh, and we have very high UV light during summer. This is very common in our environment. What about the effect of UV light on the biopesticide and chemical insecticide or pesticide as general? How could we decrease the effect of UV light on the chemical and increase their activity? And thank you very much.
I think you talked about the humidity. in Iraq is humidity high?
UV light, UV ultraviolet light.
Maybe you repeated it, please, because I cannot listen.
It's again. Okay.
Let's put down and put my earphone. Maybe. Okay.
Okay. I'm waiting you. It's okay.
Okay.
All right. Again, I will repeat my question.
Yeah.
It's like very general question, if you don't mind. As you know, our environment has very high UV light during summer. Ultraviolet light. Yes, exactly. UV light. And what about the effect on the biopesticides or chemical pesticides generally? And how could we decrease the effect of ultraviolet effects on these chemicals? All right?
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Okay. Actually, the UV light that is considered as most of the photodegradation is applied in all of the residue, and it increase the degradation of the pesticide. Actually, the prevention of these photolysis could be dangerous for our environment. So, if in terms of applied control measure, it is advised that you apply the pesticide, particularly when at the end of the day or at the start of morning, to avoid photolysis by UV light. Okay, so you cannot prevent photolysis, and one of the major point or major benefits for our environment that photolysis happen. But in some cases, you can see that photodegradation of pesticide using UV light produce some radical and some metabolite that induce carcinogenicity or mutation in animals. Right? So you have to study on these chemicals and to prevent for their application. I hope you understand what you are meaning about your question.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Crystal clear. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. I have just one question. Do you think the biodegradation of pesticides by using bacteria, fungus, whatever, could help in decreasing the pesticide pollution, especially in the aquatic environment, like small rivers, lakes?
Yes, actually, semi-aquarium or some small area that you can artificially produce for the effects of some pesticide or residue on the environment, practically is not usable, is not transferable to applied situation. Even those countries that they have very large synthetic or artificial equipment or a package that they have tried very big, large experiment on those. Still, they have some problem in the interpretation of the result. But it does not mean that we could stop on this kind of trouble. We should start on the small trial. Yes, we have got some trial. We have got incubator and insectarium and some minor or semi-field situation that in some places that we can do some of our experiment on this situation. And especially on the rodent and some also some cockroaches in some area. So there is, fortunately, there is a large inquiry about availability of the facility from the people that they ask us to manage or to study on their facility about this equipment and this material. Yes, we have got, but unfortunately, as I said, because studying on this kind of work is a time-consuming, is a costly, and also there is a large problem in this kind of study, especially a student that they are should be encouraged for studying such issues. So unfortunately, there is no tendency to work off them. But if someone has would like to work on this kind of system, we are available for foreign or for or internal student to work off this kind of problem. No problem.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
About 5 minutes, I will be available for your question, and I hope that all of you in your country could help yourself and your government to protect your environment. So I'm very pleased to graduate a student and the environment. And the first time that my colleague and the head of department announced that there is a program to educate some brothers from Iraq. I was very happy to hear that and start to prepare something about environment, because I believe that this situation only will be solved by literate the people, literate our colleagues, literate our students about the problem and the main problem of the environment, especially pollutants. So I was very happy work with you and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Doctor, so much.
Thank you.
I think there is no more question. And behave our department, plant protection, College of Agriculture, University of Basrah. I would like to thank you, Doctor, for your interesting lecture. Thank you so much.
I put down all of my email address and my phone number on the PowerPoint that you have, perhaps you have recorded it, and all my colleagues in the University of Basrah and students can communicate with me, and I will be happy to contact them in the future as well.
شكرا لكم أساتذتنا وطلابنا. شكرا لحضوركم واستماعكم.